Well, this morning we are diving into week number 1 of a new series that we've entitled Strapped 2.0, and I'll explain why it's 2.0 in just a minute. Before I do, I'm going to take a moment, like I do every single week, and look into the camera in the back of the room and welcome every single one of you joining us for Manna Church Online, wherever you're tuning in from all over the world. And of course, a very special shout out to our microsites that are gathering in Germany and Fort Johnson, Louisiana. We love you. We're grateful for you. Manna family, will you make your online family feel welcome this morning? Well, we just wrapped up a sermon series called Set Free. And over 5 weeks, we talked about the different areas of our lives that Jesus has purchased freedom for us to walk in and to live out. And so throughout that series, we've really been passionate about helping you step into the freedom that God has for your life. And I thought about doing a 6th week and talking about financial freedom and how there is actually biblical principles all throughout Scripture that teach us how we can walk in freedom financially. But I realized that I needed more than just one Sunday to unpack that. And so what we're doing is over the next 3 weeks, we are going to be unpacking biblical principles to experience freedom in our financial lives. So I hope that makes sense for you. And we've called it Strapped. Now, some of you this morning, maybe you're here for the first time. Maybe some of you brought your friend here and it's their first time and you're thinking, oh no. What have I done? The one Sunday that I bring my friend to church and they're talking about money. Like, I just want to give you a little peace of mind today. I'm fully aware that one of the top 3 reasons that people don't want to attend church is because they believe that the church is just all about our money. I just want you to know that is not our heart here at Manna Church. In fact, the last time that I even preached a series on finances was 4 years ago. It's been 4 years since I preached on the subject, and listen, that was called Strapped 1.0. So here we are, coming back to the same principles in Strapped 2.0, and here's the whole idea. We want to see you living a life not financially strapped, but financially free. So listen, in this message this morning, this is not a we want something from you message. This is actually a we want something for you message. And if you're concerned about what's going to take place, you're like, my friend's here for the first Sunday, can I just encourage you? Listen, guys, there is no special giving request coming at the end of this message. You also need to know that I am not on TV. Nobody is running to the phones. We don't have a team waiting for you to give one gift so that we can secure your blessing down the road. That's not happening today. Is that okay, everybody? But we do want to see you walk in the freedom of God in every area of your life, including your finances. In fact, the whole idea of this series came, I was in a mentoring session with a group of pastors, and they were talking about giving and generosity within the church, and the mentor pastor said this. He said, you know, I honestly believe that most people, they're not stingy, they're just strapped. And I agree. That most people have a heart to be generous and they want to make a difference with their resources. They might just find themselves in a situation that makes it difficult. So for 3 weeks, we're going to unpack the biblical principles that will help us experience freedom and set us free to be a generous people. Everybody okay? Well, if you got your Bibles, we're going to get started this morning by looking at Matthew chapter 6, starting in verse 19. I want to give you the context of this passage because what's happening is this is right towards the end of one of Jesus's most famous sermons in the Bible. It's known as the Sermon on the Mount. And in this sermon, Jesus is unpacking all of these different principles for our life. And he's essentially saying, he starts the message or his sermon with saying, hey, this is the way to living a blessed life. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the humble. Blessed are the poor in spirit. And he talks about all the different ways to experience God's blessing. And then towards the end of his sermon, he gives 3 key ideas that he encourages people to embrace in their lives. And that if you'll embrace these 3 things, you will see the blessing of God in your life in a greater measure than you ever knew before. And those 3 things that he talks about are the practice and discipline of prayer, of fasting, and you ready for the last one? Giving. He brings these three things together at the very end to say we need to be people that pray, that fast, and are generous, that give. And so we started out the year in prayer and fasting. Now we're going to take the next part of the year to talk about this aspect of generosity. Verse 19 of Matthew chapter 6. Jesus says, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. And then he gives the big idea, verse 21. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. What Jesus is saying is, like, you can invest in things that last in this life, but there's something far better to invest in, and that's eternity. And he's saying that the way that you use your financial resources, the way that you leverage your possessions, it will say a lot about the condition of your heart. And so the statement he makes is, where your heart is, where your treasure is, rather, there your heart will be also. So watch this. I want to say this right up front at the beginning of the series. Please hear me. Money is not evil. All right, we need to take a deep breath. Money is not evil. But listen, money is a great revealer. And the way we use our money says a lot about what we value in our lives. The way we use our resources reveals what we prioritize. It reveals that which is most important to us. I heard a pastor say it like this. He said, show me your bank statement and I'll show you what you value. Because you can determine what's most important in your life by where you spend your resources. The great late Billy Graham said it like this. He said, tell me what you think about money and I will tell you what you think about God. For these two are closely related. If you're taking notes this morning, let me give you the first point for today. God doesn't need your money, but he wants your heart. Oh, it's so important that we get this, church. God doesn't need your money, but he wants your heart. Think about it. He's God. He doesn't need the reason. He owns everything already. Like, there is nothing that we could give to him that he actually needs, but he deeply wants to have a genuine relationship with you and with me. He wants to have your heart, and he understands that this is a biblical principle. It's why Jesus is teaching it, that where your treasure is, where your money is, there your heart is also. So you can't expect that God has your heart if he doesn't also have your wallet. So church, he's not after your money, he's after your heart. He's not after your stuff, he's after your soul. Jesus goes on to say in verse 24, and he explains why this is such a big principle. He says, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Jesus is saying, he's making this explicitly clear. Like, one of these things has got to be more important in your life than the other. You cannot love both equally. You cannot serve both equally. We're saying, Joe, what do you mean by serve? I mean that this is the thing that you focus your life on, that this is what's most important to you, or that this is what you work for or what you live for. That's the idea of serving, that this is what you've put your trust in. So think about it for your own life. Do you trust in God's provision in your life, or do you trust in your savings account for your future? If you're going through a difficult situation in your life, are you trusting God to show up, or are you trusting what you've set aside for a rainy day? And I'm not saying you shouldn't save. Oh no, we're going to get to that. That's one of the biblical principles that we can practice to experience financial freedom, is saving. I'm just saying that saving is not more important than your dependence upon Jesus. Because you cannot serve both. We have to determine which one are we going to serve. Now here's another principle in Scripture, is that the enemy of our souls is trying to get us to serve anything other than God. And so he will try to distract us from our own pursuit of Jesus by all kinds of things in the world. It could be your career. You've heard me preach on this. It could be a particular relationship. It could even be a hobby. Like your hobby may actually be God in your life. If you spend all of your waking time and spare hours pursuing that hobby, it probably has a disproportionate pull on your heart. But what can steal your heart faster than anything else in the world, if you really take these words of Jesus seriously, is money. It's wealth. In fact, when you read this verse, if you happen to have a New King James Version Bible, or maybe you've got the original King James Version, it says you cannot serve God and money. But in that translation, it uses a different word for money. It actually says this: you cannot serve God and mammon. You say, Joe, what in the world does mammon mean? That's actually an English transliteration. So we're just taking the original Greek word from the original text, and we're just turning it into an English word. And what's interesting is that Greek word, mammonos, actually comes from a Syriac word that's very similar, that refers to, watch this, not just like paper money. It refers to riches, wealth, possessions. Anything valuable of substance that you might be tempted to live for. Does this make sense to everybody? And so what's happening here is he's saying, like, listen, the enemy is trying to do everything that he can to keep you away from God. One of his strategies is to get you to love your income or your wealth more than you love God. That you would actually pursue making more money more than you pursue a relationship with Jesus. This is what's known as the spirit of mammon. If we were to contemporize, is that a word? Make it relevant to today, Pastor Josh. That's what I'm trying to say. If we were to take that same idea, the spirit of mammon, you could call it the spirit of materialism. That I'm just living for the next thing that I can get. Oh, I got this model of a grill, but a brand new one came out, and I'm not satisfied, and I'm not happy until I get the next one. And I got this version of the J's. I'm not cool enough to wear them. That's why Pastor Josh wears them. I got this version of the J's, but how many know they're coming out with new colorways like every month? I don't know what's going on. There's always something new. There's always something better. There's always the 2.0 and the 3.0 and the 4.0. And if you are bound up by the spirit of materialism, then what happens is it's got a hold of your heart, and you're not satisfied until you get the newest, greatest, next thing. If you're bound up by the spirit of mammon, it could be about stuff, it could be about income, and you're not satisfied until you see a certain figure in your bank account. But what you'll soon discover is that figure, once you reach it, it's not enough, because there's more. There's always more. It's the spirit of mammon that would pull your allegiance from God to money. And what you need to understand this morning is that the enemy of our souls is seeking people to serve mammon instead of God. But Jesus is saying you cannot be loyal to one because you will despise the other. There's actually, what's really interesting is this teaching has even infiltrated into the church in some places. And there's actually a teaching out there that would communicate this kind of ideology. Maybe you've heard of it before, but it's called the prosperity message or the prosperity gospel. And I'm not going to call out people by name. I'm not going to call out a church by name. But there is a teaching that goes by this name of the prosperity message, the prosperity gospel. And the foundation of it is this: if you give, then you'll get. And if you just give more and more, then you'll receive more and more. And God is going to bless you. And what's going to happen is as you continue to give, if you'll just call in right now and sow this seed, God will bless you, and you'll have a nicer car. You'll get to drive a Mercedes Benz, and you'll have a nicer house, and you'll have all the income that you need. You'll get a private jet. You'll get and it's like, this is where this goes. And you see some individuals, like they're living this lavish lifestyle based upon a misinterpretation of a very real biblical principle. See, the Bible does teach that you will reap what you sow, and that God multiplies the seed to the sower, so that if we are generous, God will bless us that we may be even more generous. We are blessed to be a blessing. But what happens is the prosperity gospel distorts this biblical principle, and it makes the motivation for giving what you can receive. Do you see the difference? So now the motivation behind your generosity is not to be a blessing and not to make a difference for the kingdom of God. It's so that you can get more down the road. And so what happens in this message is, instead of helping us work greed out of our hearts, it actually works greed into our hearts. It's a mammon message, because it's all about what you can get, not how you can be a blessing to people and be used by God. And here's the big problem with this, and I've seen this, and I've talked with people who grew up in churches like this, and they've walked away from God because here's what happened. They gave generously, but God did not give back to them what they expected to get back. Or maybe they were going about their life and they ran into a common trouble. Maybe their car broke down. Or maybe they have an appliance break in their home. And all of a sudden they go, wait a second, no, I've given and I've given and I've given, and these bad things are still happening. And so what happens is they begin to blame God for not providing. And so now, instead of going, oh man, I'm in a difficult situation, God, will you help me? They go, oh man, I'm in a difficult situation. God, it's your fault. Because my pastor said that if I just gave, nothing like this would happen. It's a distortion of biblical principles. Do you guys see this? So we got to be careful how we think about money, because it's an issue of the heart. God is after our hearts. And if we even do the right thing, we give generously for the wrong motivation, God doesn't have our hearts. Stuff still has our hearts. And what that stuff will do, what the spirit of mammon promises, is it promises us everything that only God can give. And you can be deceived by this, because you might come to believe that, like, if you just had more, if you just had a greater income or a nicer house or a nicer car or your own private jet. I don't know why I keep going with those three things. Apparently a private jet is the hallmark of what I'm talking about here. I don't know why. But if you just have these things, then you think, well, then somebody will think I'm significant. Then I'll be important. If I just had more money, then people would listen to me. And so Mammon promises you identity and significance. Well, if I just had more, they would listen to me and they would respect me. Mammon will try to promise you peace and joy. Well, if I just had more money, I wouldn't have all these problems. And if I just had more money, then I'd be happy and I'd have more joy. And what you'll discover is that it never actually delivers on those promises. That it always falls through, because only God can fully satisfy those longings and those needs for a sense of identity and security, significance, joy, and peace. And what's interesting, when you read the Bible and you look at the life of Jesus, like, people came to Jesus with these similar needs. You know what Jesus never told them the solution was? He never said, oh, you know what you need? You need more money. That never happened. Can you imagine, like, a leper or a blind man or a deaf man coming up to Jesus? Oh, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus, like, looks over, oh yeah, you know what you need? You need a little more income. I bet if you just got a little bit more money, that blindness wouldn't bother you so much. That's ridiculous. Jesus meets them in their place of need with an expression and an encounter with the power and the presence of God. It's a deception to believe that money, wealth, possessions can provide for us these things that we think are missing in our lives. In fact, the writer of Ecclesiastes says it like this, Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 10. He says, whoever loves money never has enough. And whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. In other words, if this is what you're living for, you will spend the rest of your life pursuing more and more and more, because once you get what you think you wanted, you'll discover that there's more to be had. It's a never-ending cycle that will keep you perpetually dissatisfied and discontent in the place that God has you. The author of Hebrews says it like this, Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5. He says, keep your life free from the love of money and be content with what you have. For he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. He's quoting the words of God in that moment. He's saying, be content with what you have, because you have God. You have Jesus, and he will satisfy and do for you what nothing else in the world can do. I hope you see this, church. Now, I'm going to keep it real with you this morning. Because while this temptation of the pursuit of more, this temptation of making mammon and money an idol in our lives is very real, I want you to know I've faced it too. Like, I'm not exempt from this temptation. I remember early on when Alyssa and I first got married, it was a really good year in my life. A lot of things happened. At the time, I was working as a personal assistant to the senior pastor of actually Manna Church in North Carolina. It's where we came from. And I was working there, and I'll just tell you up front, like, assistants at churches in North Carolina didn't get paid that well. Like, it's not a job you do for the money. We'll just leave it at that. We did it for the ministry. Like, we're going to serve God. And so I was in that position, not making a whole lot of money, making ends meet, but not a lot of excess. And money never really had a grip on my heart, probably because I didn't have much of it, all right? Like, just wasn't much of an issue. And then a couple months before my wife and I got married, I got ordained as a pastor. And I went from personal assistant to one of the pastors of one of the campuses there in North Carolina. There's multiple campuses, same church. And so I became a campus pastor. And with that promotion came a pay raise. Come on, Jesus. It's a good moment. And all of a sudden, I am now making more than I've ever made. Now, if I told you what I got paid to be a pastor, you wouldn't be that impressed. I'm going to let you know right now. But that's neither here nor there. It was a big deal for me. It was a big raise for me. And all of a sudden, I'm like, wow, I've actually got some extra money. Well, what was really cool is my wife and I were dating. We had gotten engaged. And then a few months later, we got married. And my wife was a nurse. And she was working full-time as a nurse. And she was making more money as a nurse than I was as a pastor. And all of a sudden, we had two incomes together. Come on, called her my sugar mama. Like, let's go, everybody. Like, it was fantastic. All of a sudden, we had two incomes together. You ready? No kids. Come on, parents, y'all remember those days? Double income, no kids. It was life. And I'm sitting here, now it wasn't that, we weren't filthy rich or anything like that, but we were doing well. And it was like 4 times what I was used to making. All of a sudden, I was like, the world is my oyster. What can't we do? We went out to eat twice a week. Let's go, baby. Like, I went to the movies anytime I wanted to. Like, it was awesome. All of a sudden, I had this disposable income. Well, in the church, a few months later, our church was going through the Reach Out celebration. And if you've been here at Manna Church, you know that we do that every year as well. And it's the one time a year that we take up a special offering. And 100% of what comes in that offering actually goes to help us reach more people for Jesus. That's why we call it the Reach Out celebration. So we use those funds for local, national, and international outreach and missions. And so we would do this offering. I didn't come up with that. I got that from my church in North Carolina. And so they were in that season, and man, I loved giving to that thing, and it was so exciting, like, how can we make this work, and always pray about it. And it was so interesting because now I was making more money than I'd ever made in my life. You would think that meant I was excited to give more than I'd ever given. And so we started getting into this season, and I began to think about it, and I began to have thoughts that I'd never had before. And these thoughts would come into mind like, Joe, you don't need to give more than you gave last year. You were already generous last year. Think about all that you could do with that extra income you have right now. And then they would like disguise themselves as like wise thoughts. Like, think about how much you could save with all that extra money. You and your wife want to buy another house. We didn't have a house. You want to buy a house. Like, you need to save for a down payment. And so I began to think, like, anything wrong with saving for a down payment for a house? Absolutely not. But this temptation began. Don't be generous because there's something more that you can use that for that'll be for you. And I was wrestling with this for like 2 weeks and wasn't telling anybody. I was kind of ashamed of it. And finally I realized, man, something's weird. Something's not right. And I went to my wife and I told her, I said, sweetie, I just need to let you know about this. Like, I'm really struggling right now. This has never been an issue for me, but like, I don't really want to give more. Like, I think I kind of just want to hang on to it and like enjoy this life that we're able to have. And we processed through that, and I began to pray about it, and I realized, I think I know what we need to do. And I realized that this was spiritual. So here's what you need to understand. When it comes to managing your finances, it's not just practical, it's also spiritual. There's spiritual factors at play. And I realized that the enemy was trying to get me to get trapped by the spirit of Mammon. That I would begin to prioritize income and wealth and possessions over sacrifice for the kingdom, generosity to the purposes of God. What's amazing is my wife, she has that gift of giving. That's actually a spiritual gift that you can have. My wife has that. This is not an issue for her. And so I was talking with her about this, and I came to her and I said, sweetie, I think I know what we need to do. I think we need to give more than we've ever given before. And she was like, I think that's a great idea. And I was like, are you sure? You could maybe come back and push back a little bit. Like, and I was like, oh, like, I knew that's what we were supposed to do. So we prayed about it, and we came up with a number that we knew was going to stretch us and was going to be a sacrifice for us, but we felt like it was God. And it was so interesting because I was still wrestling with those thoughts. Even before we gave it, I was still wrestling. After I decided to do it but didn't give it, still wrestling. And then we made the commitment and we turned it in and we set up our recurring giving to pay for that thing. And let me tell you, when we did that, immediately the thoughts went away. And that's how I knew that this was a spiritual matter, not just a practical matter. It was just like a weight had lifted. Got set free in that moment. Some of you are like, oh yeah, Joe, I know all about that. Oh yeah, I know. Money is the root of all evil. Can I just help us for a second this morning? Do you know the Bible doesn't say that? Do you know that? You know what the Bible actually says? It says that the love of money, not money, the love of money. It says the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. See, it's not money isn't the issue. The issue is our hearts. It's the love. What do we love more? Do we love money or do we love God more? It's an issue of the heart. Because money's just a thing. It is neither good nor bad, but it can be used for good and bad purposes. How many of you know, I use money to provide food for my family. And I use money to keep a roof over our heads. Praise God. We use money to go on family vacations. Double praise. That's awesome. We use money to support the church and the ministry of the church. We use money to support missionaries and mission efforts all around the world. We use money to bless people. We can use money for good purposes. It is neither evil nor bad. How we relate to it is what matters. And if there is one thing that can still our heart faster than anything else in this world, it's money. The spirit of mammon and the pursuit of more. So if you're taking notes this morning, let me give you the next key idea. Listen, church, it's okay to have money. It's just not okay for your money to have you. It's okay to have money. Some of you actually have that spiritual gift I was talking about earlier, the gift of giving. You know what I've discovered? Oftentimes, people with the gift of giving, God gives them a supernatural grace to make lots of money. Because he knows that he can trust them with it to be used for good purposes. It's okay to have money. It's just not okay for your money to have you. So then the question remains, how should we relate to money? How should we relate to it in our lives? If you're taking notes this morning, let me give you the next key idea. We should manage money as stewards, not owners. Say, Joe, what do you mean by that? I'm going to explain it in just a second. Let me say it like this. We should use our resources in a way that honors God without allowing it to steal our hearts. In other words, we don't live for it. It works for us. Reminds me of a story I heard of a group of guys. They were all hanging out, working out at the gym together, and it kind of is their thing. And they would get together, go to the gym and work out. And while they were there one day, the cell phone rang, and a guy went and he picked up the cell phone. He said, hello? And a lot of noise was going on in the gym. The connection wasn't super great. And on the other end of the line, there was a lady's voice. She said, Hon, is that you? I can't really hear you there. He said, hello? He said, are you there? He said, yeah, I'm here. I can hear you. She said, are you at the gym? Yeah, I'm at the gym. She said, okay, listen, I'm in front of the jewelry store. I know I told you I was going to go shopping today, and I just wanted to run this by you, before I made this big purchase. But sweetie, there is a beautiful diamond necklace on sale right now. Do you think I could buy it? He said, okay, well, how much is it? She said, well, it's on sale for about $2,000. And he thought about it for a second. He said, well, listen, I'm okay if you buy the diamond necklace if you get a set of matching earrings to go with it. Come on, ladies. It's a good day. It's a good day. And she's like, wow, that's amazing. She's like, all right, that sounds good. And she realized, well, he must be in a good mood this morning. And so she tried another thing. She said, well, I was driving over here and I passed by the dealership, the BMW dealership. And I know we've been talking about, maybe getting that car we've always dreamed about. And I drove by and I noticed that they have it on sale right now. What do you think about that? He said, well, how much is it going for? She said, they got it on sale for about $75,000. And he thought about it for a second. He said, well, I'll tell you what. If you get it with all the extra trimmings, I'm okay with it. Go ahead and get that BMW. Y'all don't even believe this is real. He's like, look at you, so skeptical. This is amazing. Best day of her life. And she realizes that everything she's asking for, he's saying yes to. And so she decides to take it one level up. This is her moment Give it a shot. And so she says, and you know, honey, one last thing before you go. I won't ask you for anything else, I promise. But you know how we've been talking about how my mom would love to come and live with us. Do you think that maybe we could have her in and, you know, she'll just stay for a month and we'll just try it out, test it out, see how it goes. And then we can talk about it afterwards and decide if you're going to do this, you know, long term. There's kind of a longer pause on the end of the line. He said, all right, sweetie, but listen, I don't want you to ask me for anything else. This is the last thing. She said, okay, honey, no problem. I love you. I love you too. Bye, bye. And he hangs up the phone. And the guy looks around the gym and he says, hey guys, anybody know whose phone this is? Oh my goodness. Hey, there's a point to that story. You ready? It's easy to be generous with stuff that isn't yours. Did you catch it? It's easy to be generous with stuff that isn't yours. And what we need to come to the place of understanding is that everything we have belongs to God. It doesn't belong to us. God has given it to us that we might be good stewards. So we manage our money not as owners, but as stewards. Take a look with me to Luke chapter 12, verse 42. It says, and the Lord said, who then is the faithful and wise manager? That word manager is the Greek word oikonomos, which is also translated as steward. This is that statement. This is that word. Who then is the faithful and wise manager, whom his master will set over his household to give them their portion of food at the proper time? Blessed is that servant whom his master will find so doing when he comes. Truly I say to you, he will set him over all his possessions. God is looking for faithful and wise stewards who will manage their resources well. In fact, this term was actually a description of a job position that was common in that era among wealthy families. And so there was actually this position in the household called a steward or a manager, and their job was to oversee the welfare of that family's house and that family's possessions. And so a good steward was one who did a good job with the management of their resources. So if you're taking notes, let me give you a simple definition. A steward is simply one who oversees the management of another's affairs and possessions. That's what it means to be a steward. And what you need to understand is that God has called us to be stewards. It's part of our responsibility as his followers. And there's a biblical idea called biblical stewardship. And if you're taking notes, I want to give this to you really quickly so we can wrap this up this morning. But biblical stewardship is a combination of understanding three principles. Number one, God is the owner of everything. Did you know that? The Bible says, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. You can go look this up in 1 Chronicles 29, Psalm 24, 1 Corinthians chapter 5. All of these verses speak how God owns everything. We got to start in that place. But the second principle of biblical stewardship is that everything we have has been given to us by God. Now, when I get pushback, this is the place I get pushback on biblical stewardship. Because what somebody is likely to say is they're going to say something like this. No, Joe, no. You don't understand. The stuff I have, I worked for. No. God did not give this to me. Me working my tail off for 15 years, taking big risks, starting those businesses, that's how I got what I have today. No, Joe, you don't understand. I'm the one that went to school and studied like crazy and passed that exam and then got that job. No, you don't understand. I'm the one who gave up so many other things so that I could work hard. And when everybody else was quitting all around me and I just refused to give up and I kept going and going. And then I got the breakthrough. And because of that grit and that determination, I was able to receive and to make and to earn what I have today. No. God didn't give that to me. I earned it. I worked for it. And I understand where you're coming from. I just want to ask you a couple questions. And where did you get the ability to work? And who gave you the intellectual capacity to be able to study to pass those exams? And who allowed you to be healthy enough to put in the hours that you put in to earn what you gained? And who gave you the kind of personality that when all your other friends in the same field gave up, you said, no, 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 I can keep going. And you were committed, and you had that grit, and you didn't give up. Church, that comes from God. You didn't make that. God gave it to you. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 18 says it this way. It says, but remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth. It comes from God. Everything we have has been given to us by God. Here's the third principle of biblical stewardship. And the resources that God has given us are assets to be invested in his kingdom. So God entrusts us with these resources so that we could steward them well and use them wisely for the sake of his kingdom being advanced to the ends of the earth. This is the call of God on our lives when it comes to managing our finances. And the principle of stewardship says this. Here's what's really cool and exciting about this. Watch this. If you are faithful with a little, God can entrust you with more. If you're a good steward, then God entrusts you with more resources so that you can steward them well. It's why it says in 2 Corinthians at chapter 9 that God will multiply the seed to the sower so that he can increase his sowing. Like, we are blessed to be a blessing, Manna Church. In Luke chapter 16, verse 10, here's the last thing, and we'll wrap this up. It says, one who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much. And one who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much. If then you have not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth, church, these are our financial resources in this lifetime. Who will entrust to you the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in that which is another's, and everything belongs to God, who will give you that which is your own? If we are faithful in a little, God can entrust us with more. He is the owner of everything. And I want you to hear me. When we live our lives in this understanding and we follow his principle of stewardship, it will actually position us to be blessed beyond anything we would have ever imagined. And it will break the hold that money and materialism, that the spirit of Mammon has on our lives, that will set us free to experience the abundance of life in Jesus right here, right now, and reap eternal rewards. Church, it's all a matter of the heart. That's where it starts. Who's got your heart? God or money? Next week, we're actually going to look at how we can break the power of the spirit of Mammon, that power of materialism over our lives, and steward our resources in a way that honors God and releases his blessing over our finances. Make no mistake, God does bless us, and he wants to bless us. And it starts when we manage our resources his way. Let me pray for you this morning.